All right, let's get right into it. Welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're zeroing in on a truly pivotal moment in your educational journey, Grade 7 English. Specifically, we're cracking open close reading, review, and transfer. If you're ready to transform from a passive consumer of words into an active, sharp-eyed reading detective, well, you're in exactly the right place. We're going to unpack the standards that govern exactly how we read, analyze, and ultimately prove our points.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our agenda for today. First up, the close reading review. Second, evidence-based reasoning. Third, literature versus informational texts. Fourth, worked examples in action. And fifth, transferring your skills.
So I want to start by posing a question to frame all of this. What actually separates a reader from a reading detective? Think about it. A standard reader is kind of just a bystander, right? But a reading detective? They view the text as a literal crime scene. Every single sentence is a potential lead. Inferences are your clues, and textual evidence, meaning those exact words written by the author, well, that is your absolute proof. You don't just read what happened, you investigate how and why it happened.
And to be that detective, you need your main tool, close reading. In technical terms, this is comprehending, evaluating, and citing specific textual evidence. But really, the ultimate goal for 7th grade isn't just to sit back and passively absorb a story or an article. No, you're tasked with actively engaging with it. You evaluate the claims, you figure out the characters, and you draw out specific evidence to back up whatever conclusions you reach. It is a massive, incredibly empowering shift in how you process information.
Section 1. The Close Reading Review.
Section 2. Evidence-based reasoning. Now, what's really interesting about this exact standard is the rigor it brings. In the real world, you can't just make a claim and expect people to blindly believe it, right? Investigators need proof. You absolutely cannot rely on mere guesses or gut feelings about a text. The exact wording for 7th grade demands that you cite several pieces of textual evidence to support an analysis of what the text says explicitly, as well as inferences drawn from the text. I really want you to focus on that word several. Back in 6th grade, one piece of evidence might have been enough. But 7th grade introduces a major shift. You have to build a comprehensive case by pulling multiple, overlapping pieces of evidence right from the text.
Because at the end of the day, evidence is your proof. Think of it like a courtroom. A lawyer can't just stand before a jury and say, hey, I have a really strong gut feeling they did it. No way. They have to show the fingerprints, they have to play the security footage. So whether a text explicitly states a fact or you make a logical inference by reading between the lines, your reasoning must always be anchored directly in the text. If you can't point to the words on the page, your argument just won't hold up in the court of reading comprehension.
And this brilliantly illustrates our next focus, Section 3, Literature versus Informational Texts.
Now, reading a poem or a fictional story is obviously fundamentally different from reading a science article or a historical account, even though you're being a detective in both scenarios. In literature, your investigation is all about hunting for structural elements. You're looking at complex characters, who, let's be honest, are notoriously bad at telling you how they actually feel, and you're tracking recurring themes or plot developments. But when you switch over to informational texts, your detective work shifts. You start evaluating an author's claims, tracking their reasons, and heavily scrutinizing the evidence they provide. You're hunting for very different things, but the intensity of the search, exactly the same.
But here's the catch. Regardless of whether you're reading a Shakespearean tragedy or some dense article on astrophysics, your underlying anchor skills are identical. You still have to read closely for explicit meaning. You still have to make logical inferences. You still absolutely have to cite specific textual evidence and determine central ideas. The target you're aiming at changes, but your investigative toolkit, that does not change.
Section 4. Worked Examples in Action.
Okay, let's step into the shoes of the detective and procedurally walk through this at the scene of the text. Step 1. Read the text closely. That means putting away distractions, no phone, and actively analyzing the paragraphs. Step 2. Make a logical inference. For example, imagine a scene where a character is pacing back and forth, furiously checking the clock every 10 seconds and biting their nails. You can logically infer they're anxious, right? Even if the author never actually uses the word anxious. Step 3. Cite several pieces of textual evidence. To prove your case, you extract the quote about them pacing, the quote about the clock, and the quote about the nails. You stack those quotes together to build a rock-solid conclusion.
Find the clues. Build the case. That is the exact rhythm of Grade 7 English. These rigorous academic steps honestly don't have to be dry or boring. They are literally the same steps a real-life detective uses to solve a mystery. Every time you open a book, you're taking on a new case.
Let's move to Section 5 and see how this builds. Transferring your skills.
Because the coolest part? These reading detective skills transfer to literally every class in your schedule. In English, sure, you evaluate stories and poems. But when the bell rings and you walk into history class, you're going to use those exact same skills to evaluate primary source documents and historical accounts, checking them for bias and perspective. Walk into your science classroom. You use them to decipher complex technical articles, evaluating experimental data and scientific reasoning. You are citing several pieces of evidence in every single room of your school.
And when you master this transfer, you become the ultimate independent learner. You don't need someone looking over your shoulder, holding your hand through a text. You comprehend what's being said, but you also critique it. You value evidence above everything else, and that makes you entirely prepared for college, your future career, and just life in general. Through all this wide, deep reading, you build incredibly strong content knowledge across a huge range of subjects.
Which leaves us with one final, pretty exciting question. Where will your evidence lead you next? The world is absolutely full of claims, arguments, and hidden stories just waiting to be uncovered. You now hold the keys to unlocking any text you will ever encounter. So go be a detective, find the clues, and build your case. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and happy sleuthing!